So Square Enix decided to finally release the long-anticipated sequel to this remake series going on of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. For those who have been sticking around with the channel, you guys know that I was a huge fan of the first entry in this trilogy remake series that's going on, Final Fantasy VII. I actually did a whole review / essay style video. If you guys want to check it out, it's probably going to be recommended somewhere. It was a game that I really adored. It just had this close, intimate connection with, and I was so emotionally attached with all these characters, despite this obviously being a new version of a very old game that came out decades ago, practically. But this whole new depiction of these characters, giving it voice actors, giving it a performance, because back then there obviously wasn't voice acting integrated into this game. It just breathes so much life into this, and it's basically what people who originally played the game were envisioning it in their heads. Of course, with this remake, there was a lot of controversy surrounding it, because a lot of people were judging it by having padding basically meaning, I guess, this term for breaking filler in parts that were originally much shorter in the original game, and because the original game is also around 35 to 40 hours, but that's the entire story. Square Enix, on the other hand, is making it into a trilogy series, giving it probably 40 hours on average per game, making it I don't know, almost 120 hours probably in totality, given it's a trilogy. Or maybe they're going to go with an even longer story with the third entry. The thing is that there was a lot of controversy surrounding this, and I understand some of the controversy, because there were some parts in the game, despite me absolutely adoring the game, where it was a bit slow, and I felt they could have eliminated it and just gave it a bit more rhythm with some more segments. Maybe replaced it with much more action heavy segments, which the game is action heavy, but it had these slow parts where I just felt it wasn't necessary, and it wasn't progressing the story forwards. Instead, it was just showing us things that we already knew previously. With that being said, fast forward to 4 years, which I can't believe I'm saying this, because I just remember so perfectly how I made that review and stuff, and when I played the game, and how it left me basically an emotional hole. It basically left a hole in my heart, because I just didn't know what game to play after a while, because that game was such a great game. But anyway, moving on, 4 years later, we are blessed with the sequel of that game, Rebirth, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, what do I think about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? Honestly, I gotta say, this is one of the greatest remakes I've ever played. And I know it's funny, because in my recent review of Persona 3 Reload, I said it was a remake that all remakes should strive to be. And thankfully, Final Fantasy Rebirth is kind of like that, in the sense that it's basically it's almost unrecognizable from the original game. Every single aspect and every single part of the map in this game is insane. You can basically just go around exploring different open world environments. There are desert regions. There are these open world grass world biomes that are scattered around. There's this cool tropical island beach type thing that has a jungle on the other side as you progress through the story. It's insane the way it unfolds as you play. And it's over 150 gigabytes actually. It's right now a PS5 timed exclusive. There are plans, I think, to port this over to PC. I actually heard that they were going to port Final Fantasy 16 over to PC, I think this year, and they're doing the performance tests and stuff But returning to this game, I'm sorry, I kind of got lost. This game just has so many things going on, and to justify the 150 gigabytes, I'm pretty sure most of it just went to the map, because just the way these maps are detailed, just how interactable it is, the amount of stuff you could do with it is also kind of insane. There's obviously a bunch of open world generic stuff that you could probably see in another game that has open world stuff. You go visit towers, you clean out areas and stuff like that. But there's also these progressions with these side quests, as it's not just only side jobs that you can pick up throughout the map. There's whole side quest storylines that you can clear depending on the region that you are. And these are all narrative arcs that you could just do that are completely optional, obviously. But I thought it was a kind of a cool thing. And there are these little puzzles that you can do. You can do these chocobo intel hunts or whatever that I thought was kind of interesting. And again, depending by region, these side quests vary heavily, and there's other different side activities that are exclusive to the region, which I found it to be very refreshing, as you don't necessarily get bored whenever you're exploring or doing a bunch of stuff. And if you aren't like super, I guess, if you want to like take a break from the main story, you can always just like, do open world activities so you don't have to like always be stuck there with the main story. I did play I did put a couple of hours into the side content, which again I did like and enjoy. I was completely obsessed with the main story in this game. But despite my obsession with it, and despite me thinking I think was a very interesting, it's a very interesting narrative approach, I found a couple of flaws with the narrative that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a bit. Not like in like a super negative way. It's just something that could have been like corrected, I think, if they had a bit more time, which is ironic because, it's been 4 years since that gap, but they were definitely, Square Enix was definitely, dealing with Final Fantasy 16, so it probably got in the way. But anyway, just focusing on this game, I gotta point out some narrative flaws. A bit of a disclaimer here, I might jump into spoiler territory as I speak with this. It might be slight, it might be a bit maybe intermediate, so just let you know right off the bat, I'm gonna talk about some spoilers. I might put timestamps here just so you guys can skip it. But yeah, just be warned that's gonna happen. One of the narrative flaws in here, I would say, is the just how much they abuse this whole thing of like a timeline that's going on, whether it's like alternate or not. It's still confusing to me. Basically, the game sort of wraps starts with a complete continuation from the first game, but it brings Zack into the mix. That obviously Zack had his time with Crisis Core. I still haven't played Crisis Core, but going lore wise, obviously it's the prequel to this. And Final Fantasy 1 hinted that Zack was going to be in the sequel, so there's also that. But I found myself just utterly confused throughout the story because every single moment with Zack had me questioning if it's the future or the present. It just has so many things going on, or if it's the past. Obviously, it seems like it's alluding more to maybe a more future tense. But even the moments leading up to that part where Zack is or whatnot is still confusing. Again, there's just so many things going on. It's just trying to tell me a storyline, mixing backstory moments of some of these characters, especially Cloud and Sephiroth's motivation, but at the same time giving me Zack where he's at as he's looking over Cloud and Aerith as they're apparently fell asleep, but there's this deep slumber that they can't wake up from. It has so many things going on at the same time that it just confuses me. And the thing that I wanted to also talk about when it comes to the parts with Zack in this game, I'm not gonna lie, I really despise those parts sometimes. I found it to be very slow, very boring, and it didn't just have it didn't really have gameplay. It was just walking around, speaking, very long cutscene that was kind of unnecessary. And it was these insanely short missions of 10 or 20 minutes that doesn't really add that much importance to the plot or significance. It could have been just short cutscenes, and that was it. It's really, to me personally, it was pointless. And I was insanely disappointed because I really wanted to play more as Zack in terms of a very action-oriented type of scenario. And obviously, since I'm speaking in spoilers, you guys probably already know this, but you can only play as him in that type of scenario more towards the end when you're fighting Sephiroth. And it's only for 2 segments of the fight. And it pisses me off because you waited this entire 40-hour story just to basically give me 2 segments in a final boss battle that, just are super quick. They're insanely quick, and that was it basically. Another thing that I was kind of disappointed was the lack of Sephiroth this game had. I mean the lack of Sephiroth in terms of the lack of playability. Yes, the demo showed us the first chapter and how you can technically play a little bit as Sephiroth in Cloud. And it was a very cool showcase of, hey, Sephiroth and how he flows and stuff. And of course, if you want to play more as Sephiroth, play Crisis Core, I understand that. But the game's marketing and advertising was implying that there was going to be many more moments where you play both as Sephiroth, Zack. There's just barely any moments where you can play as Zack and Sephiroth, and it pisses me off. I personally found it to be very misleading. Anyway, aside these I guess narrative flaws that I had going on with the story, I'm obviously going to return to any flaws that I have with this, but I want to give it its praise. I don't want to slander the entire game. I think what it did very well, one of the elements that I found to be excellent actually, was just how smooth the gameplay is. It just had me just so enthralled with it, especially when you're fighting with these more advanced characters. And I found myself to be so drawn into the diversity there is in terms of enemies. Usually with a lot of these games, a lot of like long games just reuse assets and reuse, obviously the skins of like the enemies and stuff, and they just rename it or whatever and call it a day. But this game surprisingly had a lot of variety. I found a lot of the enemies to be very like unique in a sense. Sure, some attack moves could like look similar to others, but the way they appeared and the way they couldn't move around, I found it to be very like, I guess for some reason, unique. And I know it's a very like odd observation, but this is personally what I think. I found the enemies to be very, very cool. Very well designed, of course. I mean, it is Final Fantasy after all. I think the boss fights in this game were pretty cool, honestly. There was a few boss fights where I thought it was like just stretching it and dragging it a bit, especially since these chapters are like insanely bulky. There are some chapters in this game where it's either between the range of 2 hours or like 4, or I think the highest you can get is like 5 or 6. There was like 2 chapters, where it definitely felt like I was playing it for like ever. And I just had to like keep on checking the PlayStation like card where it tells you how long, like how, what's the remaining time. It just kept on saying more than 2 hours, and I was like 40% like in the chapter, and I'm like, what do you mean that's more than 2 hours? There's no way, But yeah, it was like stuff like that kind of threw me off a bit. But anyway, going back to the positives, I thought the boss fight designs were very cool and very smart. They're very wicked as well. I just found like a lot of these bosses have very cool like second or third phases. Sure, some of the bosses that use the insta death kill, or that has like your HP go to like 1, and then you have to like quickly like hope they have an attack bar that's already filled up, so you can use a potion to heal yourself and wish wish that the boss hasn't started some like spell that can just kill you all in an instant. But I thought overall it was very cool. I found the movements to be very nice. Some of like the 1v1 scenarios in this game, whether it be Cloud or any other character in the game, as you're put in like a 1v1 scenario, I thought was pretty cool, honestly. It was engaging. It was just like it was like a lot of like emotion put into it, a lot of hype put into it as well, and it just like had me super ecstatic through the entire fight. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I found some of these bosses to be unironically like difficult, and might be slightly a bit more difficult than the first game. For some reason, I just find like the Final Fantasy remake series now to be kind of like difficult, honestly. And it's funny because Final Fantasy 16 for me was like easy. It was a walk in the park. I only died like probably like 4 or 5 times during the entire 40-hour campaign. But for some reason in this game, I'm getting my cheeks clapped. I was getting my cheeks clapped, pause, in the demo too, which was also insane. But like in here, like there's like some boss fights where I had to take a step back, and I was like, there's no way he will have another phase, and he doesn't. He just insta kills me, and I had to like redo the entire thing. There's a lot of moments in this game where I felt like kind of annoyed. I did like some of the challenges with it, especially when they give you a fair fight. But there's some bosses where they're just like you're just a millisecond in the fight and they're already attacking. You're just casting some spell to like deplete your entire HP, which I found to be kind of annoying. But there's also again some boss fights that are fair and square. They're fair and square, and they provide you this very entertaining, 1v1 or this very entertaining fight where I thought was kind of fun. And I just found it to be like very engaging overall, as I said previously. So I started out the video obviously talking about the narrative flaws with this game, but let me talk about the pros I have with this game. I thought the story was well written, in the sense of how it handled these themes of forgiveness, grief, and I would just say ultimately friendship and bonds, because the entire core message all these Final Fantasy games have with a lot of these party members is like the bonds that you establish throughout your journey, and how they're inseparable, and how other people make you stronger, almost like Persona in a way. But yeah, I just found it to be like more explored better in this game, if anything, than any other Final Fantasy games that I've played. And keep in mind, I've only played the first remake and like Final Fantasy 16 and a bit of Final Fantasy 6. But I find it to be like so much like attached, and I felt more emotionally drawn into these characters more than I did in the first game, which is a lot to say because I was emotionally drawn into the first game. But I found like a lot of these bonding activities, because this new game poses a lot of mini games that you can explore. There's also like a very cool island chapter, I think in chapter 6 or something, which is the notorious one that everybody's talking about because of the swimsuits and whatever. I can't say it because, YouTube. But yeah, I found that chapter to be very cute, very fun to play through. I love the music throughout the entire thing. It gave me this very tropical vibe, which obviously they were trying to aim for it, but they just nailed it for some reason. And I can never get sick of the theme. But yeah, there's a lot of like fun mini games you can do here that can help you bond with these characters. There's like this new feature where you can romance some of the female interest in here. For some reason, you can romance Yuffie, but I don't think Yuffie is a romanceable character at all. She doesn't really appear to be like that attracted to you or attracted to anybody in the entire group. So I find it to be a very odd choice. I understand Aerith and Tifa, but I don't get Yuffie for some reason. They also added this new sort of cards game. I don't know if it's new or not. Now thinking about it, because I don't remember like that many of the mini games or stuff that you could do in the first game. Not that it was like forgettable. It was cool and all, but I just like this game just has so much of the mini games that I felt that I just kept on remembering it because they were amazing. Well, some of them were amazing. Some of them were okay, but you know what I'm trying to say. But this new card game thing they added, which is called Queen's Blood, was actually very cool in how they implemented here. For some reason, I just found myself so drawn into it. And when you have this like very like good deck built, and even if you have like a terrible deck, if you just use your brain and put two and two together, it's just like so rewarding. And I just felt like Light Yagami or like Lush when I was like playing these card games. It's like just I literally did like a reverse psychology of many of my opponents in here. For some reason, I just found it to be very cool and entertaining. And I think others who are like into like digital card games, like maybe Gwent from The Witcher, might enjoy this type of card game too. I did previously mention the bonding minigames activities that you can have throughout this game. There are some mini games in here that I found it to be a bit excessive, and I didn't like that the game sort of forces you to play through them to progress through the story. I get it because it's like depending on the scenario and the topic, they want you to like interact with these characters so they can have more moments and stuff. But there is some mini games that were either just not accessible that kind of like look kind of fun to play through, but you can't play through it for some reason. I think my favorite mini game during the entire game, I think, was the one where it's like a 1v1, like the boxing one, where it's like you can play as Cloud, like in a blocky version of Cloud, like his original avatar in Final Fantasy VII, I think, versus like any opponent that gets in your way. I thought it was like a very fun, like just almost cute type of like mini game. There's also one where you can like ride chocobos. And it's like a whole like racing game, almost like a Mario Kart type. And I thought that was fun too. I just kind of wish there was like more of these like super fun mini games you can play through. The island part, especially the island chapter, has some cool stuff, but it wasn't like the best. Some of them were kind of like chore, like, and some of them were just like weren't that all that honestly. I think what was like amazing of the island chapter, which is like how fun it was for some reason, like just to explore in general and just like to look at the island and how it was built. In the little like houses and stuff, I thought was kind of cool. And also like the cool scooter you can use just to scoot around and just ride around the entire island was very fun and cool. I wish there was like more grounds to play with and to ride on, but it was just a cool experience overall. It's already been said a billion times, and I think I already said it earlier in this video, but visually this game is it's just amazing to look at. It's honestly stunning. And I can see where Square Enix gets these like $300 to almost $500 million budgets, because Jesus Christ, man, like just staring at some of these scenes, I took like at least like 30 or 50 screenshots during the entire game. Like I'm not even exaggerating. There's just so many times where I was like gawking. I was like, there's no way this is the game. It looks like real life almost. It's just visually stunning most of the time. And it's funny because I actually took a PlayStation 5 controller over spring break as I went back, and I actually was playing the game on remote play for a while, and even with remote play, with even like the weird quality that it can have sometimes, it still looked amazing, which was still like surprising to be honest. Like, how can a game look this good even like on remote play? Which remote play can look atrocious so many times, but yeah, that's how good this game looks. I saw a lot of people pointing out that there was some distortion in some of these textures, especially in some cutscenes or whatnot. And I don't disagree. I did notice it sometimes, especially like on the surface level sometimes, especially like the ground can have like some weird like textures that look like a PS3 game. There are some like textures that haven't fully loaded up. It's not like an awkward like floating thing or something. It's just like you can definitely tell that there is some details missing from there that just should have been added or whatnot. But a part of me wants to give it a break because this game is enormous and it's a 40-hour journey that consistently looks beautiful. And there's some cutscenes in here where it's spotless. It just looks like straight out of a movie. Basically, it's insane CGI and animation put together. I really did like the implementation of new characters in this game. Obviously, they included Yuffie and Kate Sith into the journey. Obviously, Yuffie has been known because of the DLC that the game had. I still haven't played it for some reason. But I think that how they, I guess, fleshed out her arc in here, because they do sort of give, like, context and backstories and flashback scenes of what happened to her in the DLC and her background story arc and whatnot, and how, I guess, she finds the crew or whatever, which I thought was kind of interesting. I think they fleshed out her arc pretty well. There are some times where I think she's a bit obnoxious, and I get that her, her aspect of her her characteristic is that she's insanely, like, just loud and very agile and this and that, and it's a very natural thing. I understand it, but sometimes it can be a bit too exaggerated to the point that it can be a bit annoying. And I think her voice performance is kind of excellent despite that. I think that the voice actor showed a lot of interest through it and just really wanted to nail down the tone of the character. And speaking of performances, I think a lot of the performances in here are just, like, amazing. I didn't know that Red was voice acted by the same voice actor who voice acted Ryuji in Persona 5. I didn't realize that until someone else pointed it out. Now thinking about it makes sense. And Matt Mercer, I think, was voicing one of the characters. I think he voiced Vincent, actually, in this game, which is insane. I didn't realize it was Matt Mercer. I thought for some reason, I thought he voiced Sephiroth. I don't know if he voiced Sephiroth too, but there's some well-known names in this game that just sometimes I don't realize that it's them. There's just so much range thrown in here. But I think especially Cloud's voice actor did an amazing job in this game, especially, like, switching the tone from the first chapter where it's a bit more innocent to the later chapters becomes a bit more dark, and I guess the Cloud that we were used to in the first. So returning to the problems that I have with the game, like, I guess some cons that I want to point out. I would say that in terms of a narrative standpoint, I already did mention my issues that I have with the narrative, despite me, saying that it is great, which overall it is great. I love how they wrote in the characters and their interactions and, again, the themes they was tackling and stuff like that. But I think an issue that I have is the love triangle that Cloud has with Tifa and Aerith. That obviously was present in the first game, but the whole, like, focus in this game is just so, like, weird in terms of love triangle. It's trying to make it more directed towards Aerith for these lovey-dovey moments, yet it implies that it wants it with Tifa, because there's a lot of, like, moments where they're very intimate, or they're just sharing an intimate experience or whatnot, and it seems like it's alluding that Cloud loves Tifa, but then it alludes that Cloud loves Aerith, and it just is a very confusing arc. And I know that the game gives you the option to date whatever character you want in terms of the female love interest, but it's just confusing because the game is stirring, like, in a main direction where it wants to write of Aerith because of obvious reasons. Obviously, if you play through the game, I don't want to, like, spoil everything. And then another part, it's like, but Tifa is also here, and Tifa was, like, a lifelong friend from Cloud, and they want to make it very obvious. And again, it's just so many things going on into this very confusing and unnecessary love triangle. I don't know if it was present in the original. I don't necessarily think so. I don't remember hearing that many people talking about it. But in here, it's just so unfocused that I just, like, I don't know, it just makes me a bit uncomfortable at times. I think one final con that I want to say is that some of these chapters, despite them being, beefy with a lot of content thrown into the side, I feel that some of the content falls under category of padding, because this is like one of these chapters. It's one of the later chapters where it's like the series of puzzles that are so ridiculous, and it's like such a frustrating, like, chapter in general until, like, the later portion of the chapter where it gets actually interesting. I don't know. I feel like those segments where it has, like, these, like, unnecessary puzzles that aren't, like, hard to figure out or whatever. I mean, sometimes there's, like, one instance where it's just, like, it didn't have any direction. I was like, what are you trying to tell me? Like, what should I do now beyond this point? That I was very confused. But most of the time, it's like these very ridiculous puzzles that doesn't have to be puzzles, and they kept on repeating in some of these chapters, which I found kind of annoying. But it's a bit of a dumb observation, but whatever. In addition, I know I said the final, but I also want to say this because I just found this to be a very important observation. I think the mixing in this game is very weird, because there's a lot of times, a lot of segments, and it's funny because I was playing this thing in the TV, and usually like sometimes these games aren't loud enough, and I just put in like a 20% volume. This game, I put it at 6 or 7% volume, and it just sounded insanely loud. And yes, you can say, well, just lower the volume in the game, which I did. I lowered the music volume because the music in this game is insanely loud, and I could barely hear characters speaking. I think I lowered it to like 5 or 6, and it still sounded loud, even when I left it on 10 for the audio and the voices. The mixing in this game is very like questionable many times, and it's just kind of frustrating when you can't hear what the hell is going on, and you have to just like basically read the subtitles most of the time, which is kind of sad and upsetting because I want to hear the performances of these voice actors put into the game, because most of the time it's amazing. The OST, the music in this game, I heard that the composer of the Final Fantasy games in general might be departing, and it might be his final project involved with it, and I think he went off with a bang because this OST is amazing. There's so many segments that, sure, they're like these renditions of already pre-existing Final Fantasy themes, but it just felt like so much more powerful, and just like, like it just got me hyped in general to just keep on playing the game and going these like battles and stuff like that. There's obviously like different themes depending on regions, of course. There's some that are more electro and pop inspired, which I will say was a bit of an odd choice, and sometimes didn't stick with me, and find it to be a bit screechy at times. But when it gets to the very like cinematic and I guess very exciting and string heavy, orchestral heavy moments, especially with boss fights and stuff, and especially as it gears more towards the ending, it's just so good, man. It's just like so dramatic. It builds up the tension perfectly. It fits with the scene perfectly. It's almost like watching a movie, basically, especially with the cutscenes. I felt that the music in here was very well orchestrated. I did see that they released the demo, I think, OST, the same thing as they did with Final Fantasy 16. But I need more than demo. I need the entire OST right now. I know you can technically access it. I think soon, in a couple of weeks, if you were to purchase this game with a digital edition and whatnot, the digital deluxe. But yeah, screw that. I went into Spotify right now and listen to the entire OST. It's amazing. So after all of that yapping, I guess you could say, I think this game is great. Really, I think it's great. It has so much to offer, and I think it handles the highs very, very well. I will say there are some cons, some flaws in here that, are a bit disappointing at times, or a bit, it's there, but I don't think it like stomps the whole like, I guess, flow of the game. I don't think it's like it's so bad to the point that I can't play the game or whatnot. It's there, it exists. All games have their flaws in a way. It's something, there's some parts where a simple update can't fix, and I did hear they did release an update to change a bit of the graphical stuff, give it a bit more improvement, especially with gameplay, which is cool. So yeah, they're still there updating the game. I know Square Enix listens to the fan base, fix the things they need to fix, and hopefully they can fix the issues that they had, especially the technical issues, and they might even make this game even better than what it is in its current state. But yeah, honestly, this game is great. I definitely recommend it. Go buy it. What is my score? I'm giving it a strong 8 to maybe a light 9. Again, it's a great game, fantastic game. Definitely recommend it, and I feel that it even surpasses the first part in this trilogy remake series that's going on. So yeah, if you enjoyed this review and video, please leave a like. Comment below if you enjoy this game or not. Let me know your reasons why. Subscribe, turn notification bell on so you miss an upload from me. And yeah, that's basically it. Stay safe, everybody, and play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Listen again!